the amount of adults that come to us as well and say, I wasn't very sporty, I wasn't good at it. That's the problem. It shouldn't be about whether I was good or bad. It should be about the emotions of actually, did I enjoy it? No one turns around and said, oh, I went on a walk the other day, but I'm not very good at it. You just went on a walk and you liked it, right? So why don't we just go play tennis and enjoy it? Or why don't we go climbing and just enjoy it? Why do we need to reference how good we were at that thing? In terms of the young people, the rhetoric and the narrative that are coming from adults is only going to be therefore pushed on to children. And therefore that is what we see. We see children telling us, well, I'm not very good at it. It's already been determined for them what that looks like.
Statistics show that young people worldwide aren't moving enough. With busy schedules and shrinking play spaces, movement is getting squeezed out of daily life, and it's a big problem. After all, how we move as kids can shape our health, confidence, and habits for life. So how do we turn things around? How do we make movement something kids enjoy, not just something they have to do? Today, I'm joined by Ajaye Hunn-Phillips, co-founder of the Project PT, an Oxford-based social impact gym tackling this issue head-on. She's working directly with young people to break barriers to movement, build confidence, and rethink how we support kids to be active. We're going to talk about why kids are moving less, what's getting in the way, and most importantly, what actually works to change that. Today, we are talking about the importance of getting kids moving, because it's something we really need to rethink how we support them to do that. This has become more of a focus in my world more recently because I was utterly shocked when I was doing some research for a project about adult movement recently, that it was also talking about movement in kids. And the stat was the WHO, the World Health Organization's report on physical activity in 22, that over 80% of adolescents, so 11 to 17-year-olds globally, are not meeting the recommended levels of physical activity, which for them at the moment stands at 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous intense activity. And from my perspective, when I was younger, particularly I suppose in the lower band of that would feel quite easy to achieve, really based on the lifestyle I had growing up. But also, I've got 3 teenage boys, so it's particularly relevant. And it has varied how much they move and the input, and yet they have support and surroundings that absolutely encourage movement, from both their parents being active, lots of people around them, going to schools that encourage activity. They have facilities, they have everything. They're utterly lucky in what they get, and yet it's still a hard job. So today I've asked Ajaye Hunn-Phillips to come and join me to talk about this really important topic. Ajaye and her partner Alexa are the co-founders of the Project PT, which is an Oxford, where we both live, based fitness venture dedicated to social and environmental justice. Alexa, welcome.
Ajaye, don't worry.
There's sleep deprivation for you. I'll just flag that up now. Bit of sleep deprivation, so I'll do my best.
It's all right. Hiya.
Brilliant.
Yes,
Hi.
Alexa is the far better team member, but I'm here for us today. But thank you, Wendy. Thanks so much for having us. And yeah, it's fantastic. We've obviously just opened in Botley, which is just down the road from you as well. So utterly perfect timing.
It really is. It really is. So, before we get into the topic fully, I'd love to know about your experience as a child. If I could just quickly say that my childhood was very similar to my kids in that I had everything around me. We did weekly walks as a family. That was the norm. My school encouraged it. I hated team sports, so that massively put me off a lot of things. But I was lucky to find a few things like squash and badminton that I did like, because I had opportunities around me to do things. However, I dropped that pretty quick in my 20s. It took quite a while through my 20s to come back to actually loving the gym. What about you? What was and Alexa, who's not here today, what was your experience of movement and exercise when you were younger?
Yeah, look, do you know what? The interesting truth of the matter is, having started a business that is all about supporting people who ordinarily feel sort of disenfranchised with movement and exercise, Alexa and I had totally different upbringings and sort of childhood experiences, and that was that we loved sport, any sport, absolutely. Alexa ended up playing football for England. I had not as much of an illustrious career in sport as her, but we loved it. We loved every part of it, but that was just built into our DNA. That was just who we were. It wasn't necessarily to do with, yes, we both had privileged upbringings, we both had parents who supported us, all of those things that you've spoke about with your young people and with yourself. But the truth was we were just those people who wanted it. Interestingly enough, though, we both had siblings who had different experiences. And I think that probably it's partly to do with seeing that and seeing how you can both be brought up in exactly the same household. Let's be honest, we're parents. We don't bring each one of our children up exactly the same way. But
yes,
to a greater extent, we're both being brought up in that same place. And yet both of our siblings had different experiences. So my younger sibling came to exercise a little bit later and found interest through trampolining and then through climbing, which are two sports that we really advocate for because they're not team sports. They're not needing that hand-eye coordination, but they're something that can be incredibly enjoyable. But for ourselves, we love sport, everything to do with it, and still love it now.
Yeah, I have two sons that are avid climbers, and it's such a brilliant thing. And also, if you're lucky enough to have a wonderful climbing gym, that's certainly my youngest, who's about to turn 15, it's such an inclusive space, and he really feels that sort of positivity of anyone joining and so on. But that's one thing, and often you can be lucky to find the thing because you've got to have the opportunity in the first place. So let's talk about this sort of epidemic, basically, of kids moving less, because, ultimately we can see that this is a problem for them, not just in terms of their mobility and strength and so on, but particularly much more wide ranging, their mental health, what they expect of themselves as adults. And, let's have a little chat about why you think this is happening. So what do you think the biggest reasons are that kids today aren't active?
I think we could go on for too long on this.
We could.
There is so much, but I think the most important thing is that you've got the DFE telling us that young people need to be exercising for 60 minutes every day. And yet in school time, there is only 2 hours per week dedicated to PE. And then let's have a think about it. We're all, some of us are going to be parents, or we've got children in our lives. And the truth is, as soon as a play comes along, or we've got to practice for Harvest Festival, whatever it is, it's PE that gets knocked behind. And all of a sudden that becomes the practice for the Christmas play or for the summer play or whatever it is. So I think it's the priority needs to come from those early foundations, first of all, of getting used to it. But also then us having the ability for our young people to get to school in a safe way. So how can you cycle? How can you drive to school? Have you got parents who are time poor, who haven't got the opportunity to spend getting there? I think that first and foremost, we've got to change the school system. The school system needs to be advocating for sports and PE being every single day. The second thing is that safety thing. So how do we make sure that play and that exercise and sport can be done in a safe space? Have we all got gardens or safe areas where the young people can actually play after school or before school? Those things are sort of going. Social infrastructure is disappearing, parks are disappearing, just free play areas. If we look at the advancement of soft plays, you've got to pay for them. The advancement of adventure playgrounds. All of a sudden, a playground, Blenheim Palace, I need to pay to send my child to go and play. The lack of the social infrastructure, the lack of the safety, but also I think the lack of the focus in schools in the first place to say, hey, this is important, let's do this every single day. And then within those lessons, how are those lessons being structured? Are they being structured that we want skill acquisition? Why do we want skill acquisition? Why don't we want to just build a really positive relationship with movement for our children? That's what we want to be doing. Skill acquisition will come later on. The first and foremost is let's just have a good time moving our bodies.
And I think that's something that then lasts throughout a lifetime, because adults will often say to me, oh, I wasn't sporty as a kid. And I will always sort of return with, yeah, but did you move?
Yeah.
And that's the difference, because ultimately sports are for some people. And as you say, it's a skill. And sometimes, like Alex, you need to be, you're maybe quite talented and you can go far in that sport. And that's absolutely brilliant. But what about everyone else? And I would perhaps say that that's the majority of people. And what about the sort of celebration of seeing how it feels to move? Because I think there's an awful lot of pressure from the fitness industry in these days, because they're encouraging people to move, but with quite sort of harsh examples, and that then turns into pressure. And as we're saying before, there's a lot of pressure on kids anyway. There's a huge amount of pressure on parents to even make sure they get to school, they've got what they need, and so on. But there's also a lot of external pressure on kids to be doing it all, and yet they just might not want to, and it's like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They lose interest entirely. So what do you see from the young people that you work with in terms of how they feel about moving?
I think the first thing that, first of all, I'd like to touch on the whole idea that the amount of adults that come to us as well and say, I wasn't very sporty, I wasn't good at it. That's the problem. It shouldn't be about whether I was good or bad. It should be about the emotions of actually, did I enjoy it? No one turns around and said, oh, I went on a walk the other day, but I'm not very good at it. You just went on a walk and you liked it, right? So why don't we just go play tennis and enjoy it? Or why don't we go climbing and just enjoy it? Why do we need to reference how good we were at that thing? In terms of the young people, the rhetoric and the narrative that are coming from adults is only going to be therefore pushed on to children. And therefore that is what we see. We see children telling us, well, I'm not very good at it. It's already been determined for them what that looks like. And obviously then, those gender disparities as well, in terms of actually girls, it's very much for them not a space to be, because we still have these deep rooted notions of gender stereotypes in terms of sport, but also it does sort of translate for boys as well. I think that our focus must be on just that enjoyment aspect of it. Going back to the idea of parents and what guardians and parents can do in terms of support, the statistics are that if you didn't enjoy PE, the chances are your young people won't enjoy PE. So just watching what that narrative is around those areas for yourself. But I think that the focus for us just needs to be on that enjoyment. And unfortunately, the young people who come to us, it's very much on what can I achieve? What have I done? And our role within that is to actually take that away and just focus on that enjoyment side.
And how much would you say that the sort of modern world state, not in terms of, sort of global politics and economics, but
we can talk about that.
That's another thing that's going on that I really don't want to, because let's try and shut that out for a moment. But in terms of modernization, so I've got to mention screens. I've got to mention the fact that kids and adults are used to things becoming so much more comfortable and so much more convenient, that the sort of the perception of effort then means, well, why should I? Because there's always an easier way to do it, or why should I make that choice? What are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think that I think the instant gratification that we want nowadays, that we can just get that, we can get that takeaway from anywhere. The young person can get that game downloaded. I just want that, so I'm going to have it. That is the problem. I think there's a work ethic sort of involved in sport that needs to be, and that's why it's important, right? Because actually, within sport we build resilience, we build that work ethic, and that's why we've got to keep on driving that through. Do we take on screens? Do we think about actually, well, screens are great and can they be used to support movement? perhaps a
Yep.
question to ask. And I think that's going to be young person specific. There are lots of different sort of gadgets out there now in the fitness industry that are geared towards making it a little bit more interactive. So we use something called Blaze Pods, and they're these little light up pods, and you run around and you press them, and the kids love them because it is imitating to a certain extent that computer, that lighting up, that interactiveness. So is it that we need to take on those things and use them, but are they to blame? I don't know. I think that we need to move with the times, and the times is that there are screens, the times is that there's more cars on the road, and therefore we need to be more safety aware, and we're more and more time poor, so things need to be in shorter amounts.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And in my sort of movement world that I talk about, there's so much talk about chairs and sort of demonizing chairs, and it's not the chairs that are making us sit, it's us. We we have a choice in that, but the chairs are always going to be there because they're very useful. So let's not demonize the thing. Let's say, as you say, how can we use it or work around it to our advantage? But to know we have a choice within our family, and obviously within schools. There's an awful lot of discussion about technology in schools at the moment because it's really accelerated recently. And yet this could be a really great way to get kids more involved in PE at schools. And I'm not necessarily talking about gamification, because again, then that leads to competition, better and worse and so on. But for play, for fun, if it encourages that play that perhaps they are not seeing anymore, then that would make absolute sense.
Yeah, we've got different children nowadays, haven't we? We don't have children stood in the street with a tyre being really happy watching it run up and down, because it isn't safe in that street anymore, for a start off.
Yeah.
And our children are different. They have different expectations. So we can't be expecting ourselves to stay in that. And I think that's the problem with the education system as well. We're still sat in rows in sort of old Victorian schools and expecting that our young people are going to react the same way as they would have done 100 years ago. We need to move on and we need to shift. We have got technology at our fingertips now, and that can be excellent. But how do we then move away from our expectations of what children are and what movement now needs to look like for them?
And sort of to pull right back to purely movement levels, I couldn't agree more about the setup of schools. Going back to the chair example, we're told to sit on chairs from such an early age, and actually that very movement of getting down to the ground, sitting there, being a little bit uncomfortable, importantly, so that it's okay to be uncomfortable, shift and move, then gets taken away from us at such an early age that even teens, and mine included, were not as comfortable on the ground, or were not able to move in that way that when you're younger, it's just so innate, and actually it doesn't need to change, but we do lose it by taking that away. And we've also had conversations on this podcast about kids with neurodiversity in schools, and how absolutely critical it is for them to be allowed to move more, to be able to learn and concentrate and so on. And yet, that's just not being included. And I would argue for every child, quite frankly, kids need to move. And yet we are from an early age giving out this message of, as you say, quite Victorian, sit still, don't move, listen. And yet you can't. I can't as an adult. So how they as kids?
Yeah, 100%. That there is so much opportunity in schools for us to be actually taking children outside of the classroom and to be teaching lessons where movement could be involved at the same time. But unfortunately, there are very sort of harsh targets that teachers need to be achieving. There is a set amount of paperwork that needs to be done, and it just means that things have to be kept as simple and as easy as possible. But why isn't a maths lesson outside? Why isn't that included in our movement for the day? Why are we expecting children who are neuronormal or neurodiverse to want to just sit in a classroom the whole day? Because we don't want to. So why would they?
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so I'd love to talk a little bit more about Project PT, because the reason that I specifically asked you to come in is because you are working with young people who are coming to you with a whole variety of needs and for different reasons. I would really love to hear more about your experience, starting with why you started these initiatives in the first place, from what you saw, what you're trying to do with them, and yeah, I'll just pitch in with questions,
Yeah.
but fire away.
So Alexa and I are personal trainers, first and foremost, and we spent many years. I've been in the industry for just over 20 something, and we spent many years working with people going on a journey, and suddenly thinking, movement's for me. I love this, but PE at school was dreadful. I hated it. It wasn't right for me. And we're there and we're fixing this problem with them as adults together. And then thinking, well, but the problem's all the way back here. What do we do about this problem? So that's, I guess, where it was sort of born out of. We needed to actually go and address it in schools and address it with young people and support them, so that actually these adults that we were seeing, we wouldn't see. The idea is that actually come 30 years time, that generational situation is taken out. And I'm sure there'll be other challenges at that point in time, but that actually we can build that love for movement right from the word go. So yeah, the Project PT was born. 3 years ago, we ran a research project on behalf of, or as a result of, the Commonwealth Games that took place. And the whole idea about that research project was to understand the enablers and barriers to young girls engaging in physical activity. And a lot of the stuff that you spoke about was what came out of it. It was guardian and parental support, socioeconomic. It was clothing. So that's one thing we haven't actually discussed. It was clothing. No. It was the fact that young people need to take PE kit into school as teenage girls with body changing and all those things that we all remember. How many years ago was it? And yet you still remember it.
Absolutely.
It was going in and having to change their clothes, making sure that those clothes were the right clothes, right? There's social pressures now for, well, am I wearing the right things? But actually it needs to be a uniform. But is it the right trainers? How should this be? Am I comfortable? The other sort of bits that came out of that research was actually that the young people didn't want to be participating in team sports. That meant that their ability to do the team sport was going to define someone else's enjoyment in that. They wanted individualized sports. And actually, if you look at our PE, it is traditional sports. It's football, it's hockey, it's all the sports I loved. But it's not for everyone. And I know it wasn't for everyone growing up, let alone now. So what we found was that the sports that the young people wanted to participate in were skateboarding. It was boxing. It was weightlifting. So we actually ended up creating a project that happens every single year, where we go in and we deliver sports to young people of that nature. So we teach, last year, I believe we taught over 300 girls to skateboard and box. Girls who were totally disengaged with physical activity, didn't want to come, were bringing the notes. These were girls identified at school level for bringing in those notes, not bringing in their PE kit, refusing to do it. And by the end of it, the team had taught over 300 of them to enjoy it and to participate in it. They would then meet us in parks, in skate parks, and in green space areas to do the boxing and to do the skateboarding. And it was just wonderful. The other area that we work with is actually young people who are vulnerable to child criminal exploitation. So those who are identified as being vulnerable based on the fact that they are not included in school. So they're either not going to school, perhaps they've participated in criminal activity already, or at least antisocial behaviour. And there we use sport, we use weightlifting and boxing in there to encourage them to feel better about themselves. To realise that they can learn about the anatomy of their body, they can learn about nutrition, but they can learn about it in a different classroom setting. All of a sudden, we're doing that in the free weights area. they're gaining qualifications through that, but they're learning and they're understanding. They're out of that traditional classroom, they're building their confidence, and then they're able to make sort of better life choices for themselves through those projects.
Absolutely incredible work, and I'm sure incredibly wonderful for you to see that change. Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10 minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love. Have you got any examples that you could talk about? You can make a general example, or if you're happy to talk about specifics of a couple of those kids' journeys. It would be lovely to hear of a girl from the first project and then someone from the second one, if at all.
Yeah, do you know what? I've got. I'll talk about the second one first of all, because yesterday I was in a park and I saw one of our young people. And this is a young person, and I won't identify this young person at all, but this is a young person who unfortunately felt the necessity to carry a knife with him where he went, because I think it's really important for people to understand why someone would carry a knife. We see these young people demonized in the media for carrying knives and why they're doing it. This young person didn't feel safe. They'd made some mistakes in their early life, and they carried a knife in order to feel safe. The truth is, if they got caught with that, they would have ended up with a criminal record for themselves. They were wonderful to work with. They were challenging, but through our programme, they gained several qualifications. We haven't seen them for a couple of years now, and I happened to run into them in the park, and they've now got a family for themselves. They've got a job. They were driving a car, so they've learned to drive a car. I saw them, and they were so engaged with their young child that they had, and looking after them and supporting them. And to be honest, like for us, that person's not in prison. They're not another statistic. They are actually going out there and living their life. So that was literally last night. And then I got in my van and I phoned all of the team members that had something to do with that young person. I was like, guess what? This is amazing. Yeah. Look at this. So that's one wonderful story that I can tell you. Another one was a project that we ran about 2 years ago. It was teaching young girls to skateboard and box in a local school. And there was this one young person, and they were sat on the sidelines. So they've been identified, all these, 30 girls, all identified as not participating in physical activity. This one girl was sat on the sideline and just didn't want to engage. The last 10, maybe 15 minutes of the lesson, they finally engaged. They put on the safety gear for skateboarding and had a little go. That was like my one time seeing that young person. That would have been in around May time. We then fast forward to us running a party in a local skate park, and this young person arrives, and they arrive with their kit, so they've got their stuff, and they skate. And doesn't matter if they're good or bad, that they did it. They turned up, and they all of a sudden had a passion for something, and we're just presenting in an entirely different way to how they had. They were far more vocal in terms of their communication skills with me. They'd remembered me, which was quite nice, just from a personal point of view. But their social skills were just so much better. Their confidence within themselves was so much better, and they'd found a passion. Right, and we all know how important a passion for ourselves is, and how much that can then be an identifier for how we present and who we are as humans.
For both of these examples, there was a wonderful combination between you giving those messages, showing that it's possible, being a force for good in a less pressured environment, and just demonstrating what's possible, I suppose. But also what's so wonderful is that the child themselves, even if they didn't fully engage initially, something had to shift in them where they had to kind of get past their own barriers to be able to be confident of. I mean, my goodness, standing on a skateboard, you know, that's a vulnerable space, because quite frankly, you're gonna fall, and the fear of looking stupid, all of those things that people would be worried about, I can see that is massive. So once they've obviously taken those steps, then they feel, presumably, I've done that, I've achieved that, and I can move forward. And it's almost like you just unlocked a key, a lock, and they took it from there, in a sense. And that's it's a great way. I mean, obviously you did more hours of work and so on, but it just shows the power of a different attitude, a different way of presenting movement, and also making that space so inclusive that there's less fear of failing. And you can just tell that the repercussions in life for that are huge, because people's fear of failure, fear of how they are seen by others, we see it in adults all around us, and how much that limits the adult's life in so many ways. And yet it starts there, doesn't it? It starts particularly in those vulnerable teen years. So incredibly moving stories, and so wonderful for you to see. But what it makes me think is, what about how can this be made possible on a bigger scale? How can we as individuals, across whoever's listening, that may be inspired by the conversation and think, what can I do to help? How can we make this a bigger thing?
Yeah.
And I know this is something that you campaign about. You're very vocal to make sure that message is getting as widely received, and you're demonstrating it. You're demonstrating that it's possible. So what are your thoughts on sort of the bigger vision, as it were?
I think, first of all, we've spoke about two stories, but I think what we've missed out on, like, what were the key factors that helped support those people to feel like they could participate in the first place? And so I think that's the first thing that we need to touch on. If you're looking at starting anything, if you've got a young person that you're thinking, like, this young person's not participating, they're not doing any sport, they're not feeling good about themselves, how do I get them there? You need to find spaces that are focusing on meeting that young person as who they are, that's making sure that that person feels seen and heard and happy for the human, for their authentic self. Not a sports space that is trying to build on skills acquisition. Not a sport place that's worried about achievements. That's not the right place. If you've got a young person that was like me and that loves sport, I didn't need that social. I just wanted to achieve. That was it. But if you've got a young person that isn't showing that interest, but that you want to get into sport in some way, shape, or form, then or you want to create a space for that, it needs to be built on coaches that aren't interested in and aren't specifically sport people themselves. One of our coaches, who coaches on our skateboarding, I taught to skateboard. I can't really skateboard, but I taught her to skateboard about 2 years ago. She's all right. She's not winning any competitions anytime soon, but she understands how to meet a young person, how to see a young person for who they are, and how to make people feel entirely included. And actually, because she's still learning, that helps those other people as well. It's too many times that in order to be a coach, you needed to have been at such a top level. That's not true, because you're only ever going to be able to meet those people that also want to be at a top level. You're not going to be able to meet those people that actually just want to enjoy movement and enjoy how that feels.
And model imperfection. We've got to model imperfection. We've got to show that, well, I can go to do this, but I can't do that, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's saying whatever level you're at, and and even the word level annoys me. In fact, whatever way you move is good.
Yeah,
moving is good.
Yeah.
From the most rudimentary level of moving right through. It doesn't matter, but it's got to be about the positive connection to movement.
Yeah.
And I love that she's not good at skateboarding, because not only is she showing that imperfection, she'll be showing her vulnerability, because she's happily failing in front of. And I bet you she has a right laugh at herself and lets them laugh at themselves too. Because I certainly know that when I do certain things in my coaching, I absolutely laugh at myself. When I'm teaching a lovely balancing move and totally topple to the side, it's important, because that's reality, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. We all need to watch our language around that, right? We all need to watch our language about our own bodies, about how we're moving, about failure, and ensure that the language that we are using isn't then encouraging some type of self-deprecation in the young people that we are trying to empower in the first place. The other thing is that those coaches, they need to understand neurodiversity. They need to understand how to work with young people who have gone through trauma, how to create an inclusive space, how to ensure that their language isn't still perpetuating those stereotypes that we're trying to break down in the first place. But also just bringing fun. You know, we take music to every single session. We have food. We have food and drink, so it becomes a social thing. So it's not just the focus on the sport. It's actually, well, we're going to sit down now and we're just going to have a chat and we're just going to have a nice time, because that's also where friendships are built. So another issue that we saw as personal trainers, but also that we see through young people as well, is that young people are shuffled into karate practice and shuffled out again, right? There's no opportunity for them to build friendships in the first place. So we know, as parents of teenagers, that as they start to become teenagers, friendship really matters as to whether a young person is going to participate in something or not. If we haven't built that friendship, then why are they going to continue to participate in that activity? So our coaches really focus on how do we support those young people to build those friendships. We've got 30 girls going to a skate park. If they all just leave and haven't built a friendship in the first place, what are the chances they're going to go to that skate park on their own afterwards? It's not going to happen. They are encouraging those young people to, are you on Snapchat? Have you got WhatsApp? How are you going to communicate with each other? Where are your guardians? Let's introduce them to each other so those friendships can continue and they can continue to do those sports as well. My takeaway points for guardians, for parents, for anyone that's trying to set it up is that don't focus on the sport, focus on everything else around it, focus on that pastoral solution to make sure that those young people are entirely supported to continue doing it outside of it, but to want to do it because you're meeting that young person for who they are.
And going back to schools, how do we make change in schools? Because that feels like a very, very big one. And it's a lot of people are trying to make change, but ultimately it's a kind of a perfect space. You're with your friends in that environment often. And you know, you've got the opportunity. Obviously you talked about time and priority before, but there's also something to be said about those who are what's being taught, what they're trying, and the range of things that they're trying, as well as you say, the way that it's taught to make sure it is inclusive and positive.
I think there's two different focuses. You've got primary and you've got secondary, and they're totally different areas. So I think the challenge that we have in primary is that the statistic of how many adults enjoyed PE at school is somewhere between 60 to 70% didn't enjoy it, depending on which year we're going to look at those stats, right? So 60 to 70% of teachers right now didn't enjoy PE. So what are they delivering, and how what percentage of those people are moving and enjoying movement in the first place? What's their then narrative and focus going to be on it? So I think firstly you've got those teachers who are doing fantastic jobs. This isn't a I've got teachers but they need support to build lesson plans that focus on enjoyment in movement, not on skill acquisition, and that they understand the language that they need to be using to support that. Sports days do need to encourage competition. They don't need to be just about having fun, but they must be about having fun as well. They need to be about the whole sporting event. So children should be encouraged to be cheering people on, to be bringing up anyone that's just a little bit slower than the other person, to support them. So it's a big, amazing, awesome day of fun, not
celebration of movement.
Alexa and I to go and win everything and for everyone else to not enjoy it at all. It needs to be a whole day where everyone enjoyed it, because I played my part because I was great at organising this. I played my part because I was great at empowering people. Everyone needs to be involved in it. Moving on to the secondary schools, the challenge that we have in secondary schools is that the PE teachers that are in secondary schools were good at PE. They loved it. So that was one thing that our research project showed, was that young girls felt that the language used towards them versus boys were different from PE teachers. But they also identified that the language used to them if they weren't sporty versus the sporty ones was different as well. And that all needs to change. It needs to be a focus on just enjoyment. Everything else will come along afterwards. But we need PE teachers that are like our coach. You know, we run gyms. That's what affords us to do all this awesome stuff. We should probably talk about that at some point. But the coaches that we have, a lot of them didn't have good experiences with PE and with sport growing up. And that's what makes them be able to meet our members and to meet the young people at the right point, because they have that lived experience. And I think we need PE teachers in our society that have that lived experience of finding sport later on, and then they can then impart and they can understand and they can have empathy for all those young people, that it just doesn't feel like it's a natural thing for them right now.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And obviously you have the ability to be able to pick and choose the right PTs to work in your space. Do you want to talk a little bit about the gyms? I know, so I live near Botley, and that's your second gym that you've just opened in January, which is really, really exciting. I just had a flyer through my door with the Royal Mail, so it worked.
It's from Velocity Bicycles, actually. One of
brilliant! Yes, another independent.
Independent business.
Sorry, go on.
Good, good. Cycling around and stuff, so that's great.
Excellent.
So you know, the reason we're able to do all of this stuff is because we have we now have 2 gyms, and in those gyms, a certain percentage of the money that people pay goes towards this impact, which is fantastic. I guess most of them have that experience themselves. So 70% of our members report not enjoying PE and sport at school and not feeling like they were part of something. So the whole idea of our gyms were to bring together people who felt that they felt intimidated by gyms, they felt disenfranchised, they felt that it wasn't a space for them, and for us to create a truly inclusive space. You know, I think lots of gyms right now, marketing is all about inclusivity. The product, no, not about inclusivity at all. Whereas for us, the product is solely about inclusivity. We have an EDI representative. We've only got 2 gyms, and yet someone's job is to literally tell us all about EDI and to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Every single process that we go through, we make sure that those stereotypes are removed. We make sure that every single part is focusing on, well, how is this inclusive? How is someone going to feel coming into the gym? What is their experience going to be? How do we need to support this person, because this person is different to the last person that we worked with? And the gyms are just wonderful spaces for people who didn't think that movement was for them, and I'm sure that it's the same for yourself, Wendy. The people that you're working with are exactly the same. They didn't feel like movement was for them. And it's fantastic because it fosters a space where people are having these conversations that we're having as well. Well, how do I support my young people? How do I support my children? Or I've got a sibling, I've got a relative, I've got an elderly parent who needs to be moving. Where is there a space for that person to go and for them to move? How do I support them?
And that's a whole big angle that we haven't particularly, which is the point that kids they may, particularly as teenagers, sort of come across as not being affected by whatever us adults say. But the reality is, whenever we are showing the way to move, they are watching us. And when we don't move, they're watching us. And, you know, I think back to things like playgrounds with my youngsters, where I was probably exhausted, to be fair, but I would be more likely to sit on the outside chatting with someone than actually using the play frame myself. And so now, as a 50-year-old, and the last few, I'm actually on playgrounds and I haven't even got kids anymore. So it's about modeling. It's about, and I will be that granny. It is about modeling that. And I think, going back to the sort of making it less about skills, the most important thing is that it's modeling just moving and having fun and enjoying just moving, trying different things, making it easy for kids to sort of not even notice they're moving, because otherwise it's such a big pressure. And I think adults truly feel that as well, and that's certainly what I come up against all the time. And that confidence hasn't been built from an early stage, but also there's so many people around. There's a lot on social media where it's about, as we were saying before, doing the best that you can do or being the best at such and such. And yet that just doesn't appeal to the masses, and it's not relevant at all.
Yeah.
So having the spaces that you have are brilliant. And you told me, I think before as well, I haven't actually been in, that there's no mirrors. Is that correct in your gyms as well?
Yeah, it's
which I think is amazing.
I forget everything that we do. Like, what is it?
Yes.
But yeah,
but that's really different. Absolutely, and it makes so much sense. And are people allowed to sort of use their mobile phones and film each other, or is that a thing?
I think
because that one I find really strange.
No. I mean, it's you know what? It's not a written rule at all. I think it's just something that people understand, that that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You're not going to film yourself, and we're there to support you. We're there to do that piece of work for you. You don't need to film it. We use books, so we don't have an app for we have an app when it comes to you booking in and stuff. We don't have an app for your programs. Your programs are in a scrappy little blue book that everyone loves. But it's a book.
Yes.
It's pen and it's paper, and it's like, put your phones away. Let's focus on just being present in this moment and moving, and not having those sort of distractions that we have. And it's wonderful.
Amazing. Honestly, I'd love to talk to you for hours about this, because you know so much, but also you've had such great experiences, and the work that you're doing in the community is fantastic. And I love the fact that you are cleverly a keen businesswoman. You are helping adults, even though obviously there's payment involved, if you see what I mean, but to also help. I know you also help adults as well as children. You have other schemes. You've got so many. And if anyone wants to read about it, please go onto the Project PT website, because it's so inspiring seeing all the different initiatives that you do. So it's not all about kids, but it's a special thing that you do, because I think there are very few spaces around that are dedicated in this inclusive and welcoming, open way to really encourage kids. So it's fantastic. And what's next for the Project PT? I mean, I suppose the what's next is your second gym ultimately, and making that a success and bringing projects in there.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different sort of focuses and pathways. So we will, over the next 3 years, be rolling out another 5 gyms. So there will be another one coming this year, if not another one. We've shifted a lot of our focus now onto knowing that every gym we open will have X amount of impact in the community, and that's something that we want to continue, because us being able to finance our own impact means that impact can continue and we can develop it. We're not beholden to certain funding and grants and bits and pieces. So that's one of our focuses. The other focus is we run holiday camps for young people as well. So we run holiday camps that are specific for young people who have neurodiversity. And our focus there is on supporting them to feel and enjoy movement. Again, those with neurodiversity are going to struggle in traditional sports. So how do we help them to fall in love movement, and just have a good time at camp as well. I think camps can be difficult for certain young people, but I think that our team have nailed how does that look for a young person? How do we support them? What do we need to do in order to make them feel seen, happy, and heard? And then our last focus is on really developing our offering for young people within our gyms as well. So we offer a junior membership for young people, but what does that need to look like? And that's going to change over time. We need to make sure that we are constantly questioning, right, is this program right now, or have young people changed? What's happened in the media? Yeah. What's happened at this point in time, and what do we need to be doing? And then our last one is really just challenging everything that's going on in the world. And making sure that we're at the forefront of saying, right, this isn't okay, actually, and we're going to be trans inclusive. We have programs that will support people who are non-binary, support people who are coming from the LGBTQ plus community, or coming from a space of a physical disability, and making sure that we are leading the way in how that needs to look for every single person. It's the time, right?
It is. It really is, and it's brilliant, and it's yeah, absolutely, and represent everyone. Yeah. And what you're saying is always that you're meeting the person, whoever they are, where they're at, and that is what we all need to do for each other, and we need to do for ourselves, because all too often we are putting pressure on ourselves that's entirely unneeded and unhelpful. Yeah. And so again, if we can model that as adults, then that is going to be helpful for our kids to see that. So yeah, no, really exciting stuff, and big growth plans. Brilliant. And the fact that you aren't so beholden, I think, if anyone was listening and they love the way that you have set this up, and understanding that one thing can fund the other, yeah, then I'm sure you'd be welcome to have conversations with people, because we need more of these initiatives everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. Business needs to do good, and we need to understand that we don't need to be a social enterprise. We don't need to be a B Corp to do good stuff. We just need to, the same as we would for our neighbour, as businesses, we need to do that for our community as well. And it feels great, and it's good for business as well, without being too crass about it. But absolutely, it's the right thing to...
Well, no, we need it in the economy. We need people to have jobs. I mean, yeah. It's important, but especially jobs where you get huge fulfillment, because you're making a really good impact on the world.
Yeah, 100%. I think our employees couldn't be. I would never call them our employees either, so I'm not sure why I use that term. But our team, they're so engaged. They're so, if I say, like, I've got this crazy idea that I want us to do a collab with this company here and do this, they're jumping to want to be part of it, because they I think people want to be part of something greater than just being part of a business. People want to make change. They want to have an impact. Yeah. There are so many opportunities for businesses to have that and to do that, and to not just focus on that commerciality.
Yeah, absolutely. So if have you got any final messages about movement for young people? I think probably to speak to potentially to parents, because I think parents feel a lot of pressure when things aren't quite working for their young people. So maybe just to speak to parents as a sort of a final message would be useful.
Yeah, look, I'm coming from being a guardian. I'm a parent to 2 children, soon to be 3, and my one of my children, sport's not for them. They've got 2 mums that love sport, but sport isn't for them. And all we've done is continue to try stuff, and to try this and to try that, and build the focus and the enthusiasm, not to being about that skill, but actually to being about, did you enjoy that? What does that look like? What friends should we bring along? But also making sure that it's not just about taking your young person to a sport. It's about making sure that the literature that you've got around your house, the films that you're watching, the music that you're listening to, the conversations that you're having in the household are supporting your young person wanting to try other things. It isn't just that focus of, I'll take my young person to that sport. It's, What are you doing to role model that? Are you trying something new? Are you trying it with them? If you look at the statistics, all of those things added on top of it are what will encourage your young person to participate, not just I've taken them to something and then I've brought them home again and I convinced them to do it, because I know how hard that is as well. But add in all those extra things. Think about the books that you're buying. Think about the TV programs that you're watching together. How are they encouraging specifically girls to participate in the sport? My key thing, though, is that if you are a father and you encourage your daughter to participate in sport, she is more likely to participate in it than she is if her mother encourages her. So fathers,
Really?
Your responsibility is to get your girls moving and to participate in the sport with them, and they are far more likely to participate in it.
Interesting. Very interesting. I wouldn't necessarily have said that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, women in sport
so much.
is a great place to go for those statistics. So Women in Sport or Sport England, just to kind of understand how you can support your young people more.
Potentially as well with schools, to challenge, like you were saying, when the priority shifts on PE and movement and exercise for young people, to actually ensure that the schools are aware that you feel there is a priority there and that it's important, and seeing in what way you can support the school to provide that PE, because obviously if anyone has time or skills, then any school would be, I'm sure, very welcoming to have extra ideas and so on, just like you've done.
Yeah, 100%. And remembering that you don't need to have those skills. Learn it with them.
True.
If you've got an interest in going and doing some type of sport, go and run the club and learn that sport with that young person. That would be so powerful. Fall together and learn together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, Ajaye. I'm really, really grateful for coming on, inspiring us, and hopefully great things for the Project PT in the future. So the website is exactly that, projectpt.com. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
So easy to find, and you're also on Instagram, but I will be putting all of that in the show notes. So if anyone wants to connect with you, ask questions, then I'm sure they will reach out.
Wendy, thank you so much for having us and for sort of facilitating such a great conversation. It's really important.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.